Well, hello and welcome to another Faith, Philosophy and Life with me, Mr. Shelton. It's great to see you here today. I wonder if I asked you, name people who changed the world, who you'd come up with. There are three different things behind me. I wonder if you can work out who any of they are, or even the picture on my left rather than the person. What's it all about? So, have a think about that while you watch our cheesy intro music. Okay, so welcome back. We've got the top left, we've got Martin Luther King. You've done a fair bit of work on Martin Luther King this term, quite possibly. He is a black civil rights, was a black civil rights leader in America, Christian, believed that everyone should be equal and got black and white equality in the United States of America. Mother Teresa, who you've also hopefully done a little bit of work on. She was someone who helped the poor in India and around the world. And then to my left you've got the slave trade. And you may not have heard of this person, William Wilberforce, but he changed the world quite dramatically. So our title today is What Effect Did William Wilberforce Have on the World? And that's our title to write down. What effect did William Wilberforce have on the world? And as usual, do pause me as we go. Our learning objective is to explore how the slave trade was affected by Christianity. And our literary objective is to extract information, putting information format into a different order. It's going to be a good outcome if we can say how William Wilberforce, how his faith affected his life, because that was huge. It's going to be great if we can say some Bible quotes that he used and some quotes that he used to sort of back up why he does what he does, and even better if you can evaluate how people could best help the slave trade today. During today's session then, we've got the picture we've just looked at. We're going to look at 6 W's, a media clip, some quote cards, and then we're going to think about an organisation called Stop the Traffic. So first off, I'd like you to write these 6 W's down in your book and label them and see what you already know. You probably already know the who because you know it's William Wilberforce, and you might know what he did based on the conversation we've already had. So pause me now while you get those down. Okay, we're going to come back to that throughout the session, so it'll be really interesting to get all of those filled. The next thing I'd like to do is in the description below you'll find a link to a worksheet which you can type, you can print off. As always, please send everything through to your teacher. I'm going to play a clip now that I found on YouTube, really good one this, on showing who William Wilberforce was and what difference his faith makes. And I'd like you to answer the questions from that worksheet while you're watching this. So make sure you've got the worksheet, and when you've got the worksheet, just play me again. So get the worksheet and then play me.
By the late 1700s, British slavers were capturing as many as 50,000 Africans each year and taking them to the Americas. So how did this enslavement of Africans come to an end? In the United States, it would take a civil war. In the British Empire, it would take a movement that included a man named William Wilberforce. While slavers were seeking slaves in Africa in the late 1700s, William Wilberforce was living in luxury in his family's estates in London and Wimbledon. Then he spent a few years gambling and dining with friends on the finest foods at college in Cambridge. Years earlier, he'd been fascinated by a young preacher named George Whitefield, but now all he wanted was a seat in the British Parliament. In 1780, when he was only 21 years old, Wilberforce got his position in Parliament. During his early years of service, William, in his own words, did nothing to any purpose. My own distinction was my darling object. Then in 1785, while on a trip across Europe, the emptiness of William's plush life began to gnaw at his soul. Finally, in the spring of 1786, following months of dark depression, William Wilberforce trusted Jesus Christ alone to transform his troubled soul. As a new believer, he thought about abandoning his political position, but John Newton, the ex-slave trader who had penned the hymn Amazing Grace, urged Wilberforce to use his parliamentary position for the glory of God. A few months later, Wilberforce received a letter urging him to work to end British slave trafficking, and he began to turn his efforts toward this goal. Now, despite his personal charm, Wilberforce was a clumsy political strategist at times. He and his friend Thomas Clarkson introduced legislation to limit the slave trade in 1789, 1791, 1792, 93, 97, 98, 99, 1804, and 1805, only to be defeated every time. Opposition to Wilberforce became so fierce that one friend feared he would be barbecued by African merchants and eaten by Guinea captains. Finally, in 1807, the efforts of Wilberforce and Clarkson combined with the news of a slave uprising on an island known as Haiti to turn the tide. Parliament outlawed the slave trade in the British Empire. The circle around Wilberforce then turned their efforts toward abolishing slavery itself. Poor health forced Wilberforce to resign from Parliament, but Clarkson and others continued this campaign. In July of 1833, 3 days before William Wilberforce died, it became clear that they had the votes they needed to end slavery in the British Empire. The next month, the House of Lords passed the Slavery Abolition Act. 30 years later, slaves were emancipated in the United States as well. Christians rightly celebrate the impact of faith on the abolition of African slavery, but it's important never to forget that slavery didn't go away in the 19th century. In fact, in the opening decades of the 21st century, at least 12 million human beings live in slavery. Each year, more than 500,000 men, women, and children are transported as slaves across international borders. 70% are female, half are minors. May God raise up a new generation of men and women like William Wilberforce to bring an end to slavery in this century as well.
Okay, so now that's done, I'd like you to go back to your William Wilberforce 6Ws. Can you add any more information to those? So hopefully now we can think about how William Wilberforce's life actually made a difference in terms of his beliefs and how that affected his life's mission, because before he was a Christian he didn't particularly think about these sort of things. A great outcome if you talk about some Bible quotes, and that's what we're going to do now. So what I'd like to do, again in the description there was the quote cards. I'd like you to have a look at those quotes, and I'd like you to choose one Bible quote and one quote from William Wilberforce. I'd like you to write them down in your book, and I'd like you to explain what you think they mean. So let me say that again, using the description below. I'd like you to choose a quote, a Bible quote, and something that William Wilberforce said, write them down and say what you think they mean. Okay, so we're going to think about an organisation now called Stop the Traffic. Now, these clips are a little bit old, but trafficking is actually the fastest growing illegal trade around the world today. So trafficking is massive. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to play this to you, and I'd like you to watch these. There are a few shocking scenes in there, but I think this explains what Stop the Traffic does really well. And actually we'll start to see that modern day slavery has not gone away. Even though it's now illegal, it actually happens even more necessarily than it did in the days of William Wilberforce. So let's watch this now, and then I'm going to give you a task to do.
people trafficking, the fastest growing trade across our world. Every minute, every day, men, women and children are being transported, used or sold against their will. They are the victims of trafficking. Right now, as you watch this film, trafficking is happening. People are being herded across borders, across continents, sometimes in groups, but they are often trafficked alone. They live in terror. Others watch their every move. They treat them like cattle. But the truth is, they're not just a statistic. These are people. Someone's mother, someone's child, and they're dreaming of freedom. "200 years ago, William Wilberforce was one of those who realized the true horror of the slave trade. It was right under his nose. It was the backbone of the British economy. It was wrong, and it was growing. Driven by his Christian faith, his convictions compelled him to act. And the same spirit that would whisper in his ear, 'End slavery, turn the key, free the slaves,' it's the same spirit that whispers in our ear today." March 25th, 2007 will be the 200th anniversary of the abolition of the slave trade. But there are more slaves trafficked today than there were then. We're going to have to act. We're going to have to do this all over again, and this time abolish trafficking for good in all its forms. March 25th, 2007 will be Freedom Day. Not just a celebration of history, but a moment to be inspired by the champions of the past to help us fight for freedom. The freedom of every human being who right now belongs to someone else as a slave. We have the keys to unlocking their dreams for freedom. We must stop the traffic.
Okay, so just coming into land then today, it's only a short clip, I realised that today, but there's lots of information in it. I'm going to leave you a rather large reflection task to do. It's going to be good if you can say how William Wilberforce's faith affected his life's mission. We've talked about that extensively. Great if you can say some Bible quotes that affected his life. Again, I think we've got that in the bag, and even better if we can evaluate how to best help the slave trade today. And that's what brings us to this. Okay, so this is the question I'd like you to answer. So you're going to write the question in your book. What did William Wilberforce change the world? How did William Wilberforce change the world? So write that in your book and underline that, and then come back to me. Okay, now I'm not going to read all this through with you, it's very clear. It starts with a show understanding, and then it goes all the way up to an excellent understanding. And so the idea is that you start at the bottom, or the top should I say, and work through those and add as much detail as you can using all the information that you've got today. And that will answer that question. So I'm going to leave it there. Make sure that you pause this so it is behind me and you've got it to do your work with. Thanks very much for your time. Oh, by the way, please send everything through to your teacher as well, because we'd love to see this piece of work and see your full understanding. So thanks for your time. Stay safe. Wash your hands. God bless you. And I'll see you soon.